Welcome, guys, to ILWPOD. This is the I Love Wrestling podcast. I'm your host, as always, Justin Wright, but you're not here for me. We're here for the villain, Marty Scurll. How we
Hello,
doing, man?
everyone. Hello. You said to me before we were recording, you said, I'm not going to do much of an introduction.
Was that
Wasn't,
more than
I think that actually, you know what? I quite like that actually. Let's just get into it, just
right
straight in.
into
This is
the?
the villain, Marty Scurll. Here he is.
That's it. He's here. We know who he is. We don't have to run down the accolades.
They already know.
He's
If they're listening to this, they would have read in the title, like interview with Marty Scurll. So maybe you don't even have to introduce me.
exactly. Um, Before I get started with the questions, is there any like events or upcoming places where these fans can go see you that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yeah, maybe I should have been a bit more prepared. But so in terms of social media, typically all I really do is Instagram. Do have a YouTube account as well, which I normally intend to do more on, but the one that's most consistent is Instagram. Obviously not TikTok anymore. Um, but so I put all my dates on there. But off the top of my head, I will be wrestling in Fort Worth, Texas, February 8th for Martinez Entertainment against one Laredo Kid. And then the 15th of February, I'll be in Sudbury for Project X Wrestling in Canada. And then the next date, the weekend after, I can't announce yet because I don't think it's been announced. But in terms of dates in the States, uh, March 16th, Mucha Lucha in Atlanta. I go wrestling Dr. Wagner. And then WrestleMania week. I know lots of people will be in Vegas for WrestleMania week. And I have so many fans in the States always say to me, like, when you're wrestling in the States, when you're wrestling in the States, it's like, well, going to be wrestling in Las Vegas on April 17th, which I believe is a Thursday night. Quite a late show. I think it's like 11 p.m. because well, one, it's WrestleMania week, and two, it's Vegas. But all the information is all plastered on my Instagram. So I would love it if the people would come out and see me. That would be really, really cool. I know for a lot of people, it might have been a long time since they've seen me live. So WrestleMania week, I feel like there's no excuses because everyone's, yeah, I mean, not everyone, but a lot of people come out for WrestleMania or at least WrestleMania week. So I'd really appreciate it if people would come out and see me. That'd be sweet.
Of
But yeah,
course.
that's my plugging done, I guess.
Okie dokie. We will start. I always start with the beginning of our wrestling fandom. You mentioned off camera that at heart you're a fan. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna kick it off with how did you find wrestling and when did you know you fell in love with it?
Um, what's funny is so I was never like I always say that wrestling found me because
Okay.
it wasn't something where someone suggested to me, hey, watch this, or I didn't have an older brother or a parent that said, watch this. Rather more when I was my parents divorced when I was super young, when I was a baby. And so my mother pretty much single-handedly brought myself and my older brother up. And when I was young, she couldn't afford a kind of a poor family growing up, and she couldn't afford a childminder. So I used to go to her work with her, and she used to work in a home where she looked after like disabled people, older disabled people. So she would cook and clean, that kind of thing. And I'd have nothing to do there other than sit in front of the TV and keep myself entertained. And this was before the days of Netflix and everything else. So daytime TV in the UK wasn't too exciting. But they did have a bunch of videos, VHSs, if you remember them. And all the videos all they had were horror videos or movies and wrestling videos. And I was too young or too scared for the horror. I didn't want to watch Evil Dead when I was 5. Um, but I started watching the wrestling. And dude, I swear down, it sounds like a story, but I'm pretty positive. I put it in. The moment I saw it, I was jumping up and down on the sofa, being like, I want to be a wrestler from that very moment. And I thought, so my dog is barking big time. I'm gonna, okay, stopped. I'm gonna text him and tell him to quiet down. But yeah, and it's funny because I said that out loud at the time. I want to be a wrestler, and obviously I had no idea what that even meant. I didn't know that wrestling was a work or anything else, but I just saw it and was just instantly attracted to it, instantly just consumed by it. Um, and I do now, looking back, kind of self-diagnosing myself or being my own therapist. I think that not growing up with being close to my father or really any sort of male role models in my life. I look back now and like I didn't realize this till I got older, but I was like, well, I was brought up by like my mother and my auntie and my grandmother. And then when I went to school, my teachers were female. So I think when I saw wrestling, I was like, whoa. I was just like wrestling was almost like my sort of male influence on my life or my sort of, I didn't have any male role models. And then wrestling came along. It was like, wow. And I always tell this story how I remember, so I watched wrestling from a very young age. And then I remember once I was watching some other TV show, I was probably six, seven, whatnot. And there was a man that was topless and he was just normal man. But in my
Okay.
head, I saw him and I was like, why does he look so skinny? Like, why he looks like he's sick or something. And because I thought that men's physique, a normal men's physique for me was like the ultimate warrior. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
just assumed that all men looked like that. I didn't realize that they were like jacked and larger than life. I just thought, oh, that's what men look like with their tops off. So that was kind of like a funny, like light bulb moment. I was young. I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, but like I said, no one pushed it on me. Just as soon as I saw it, I just became just obsessed. And I was one of the kids that never grew out of it, I guess.
I can relate completely. Ever since my dad turned it on when I was a kid, I've never turned it off.
Mhm.
Probably 20 plus years I've watched it. Like I'm 25 now, probably watched it since I was 2, 3, 4 years old.
Wow. Yeah.
Never turned it off.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of people, you do get people that are kind of into it for a while or when the business is hot and people kind of get into it, fall in and out. But for me, it was always just, yeah, instant passion, I think. And very, very lucky to have it because I mean, now I've got older, there's lots more things that I've become interested in. But like kind of, I think you said this before the interview started, kind of wrestling's always been that one sort of consistent thing that's always
Yeah.
I've always enjoyed and always, you know, been like the major passion of my life. So yeah,
It's a
I
good
mean,
escape.
I think so, yeah. And I think sort of growing up, especially coming from the UK and a very small like part of the UK, um, the idea like watching professional wrestling, especially when I started watching like the WWF, um, the idea of kind of one day maybe becoming a wrestler, moving to America and sort of wrestling for a company like that was so like it seemed like such an impossible sort of feat, you know what I mean? And people
Yeah.
from my village didn't leave the village and everything else. And I think when I told everyone when I was a kid, oh, I'm going to be a wrestler when I grow up, I think they all just like, oh, ha ha ha. And yeah, I just kind of became determined to do it. And in my head, it wasn't a case of, oh, I'd like to be it. It was, I'm going to become a wrestler. Like there was no plan B. 100% knew I was gonna sort of
No
follow
other
my dream.
options.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Just I, 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 I did a promo the other day on Dr. Wagner, and I said, well, it's actually I'm gonna butcher the name now. Hilo Del Dr. Wagner Jr. Um, and I said, you may have been born into this business, but I was born to do this. Like I wasn't born in it, but I was born to do it. And I really, really honestly believe that. Like I just can't, there's nothing really else that I'm good at. So sing is that thing for me. And that's, and yeah, your podcast is called the I Love Wrestling Podcast. And that's why I agreed to come on because I do as well indeed love pro wrestling. So I'm in a good place.
Definitely. This is the right place to be if we love wrestling. You mentioned growing up in the UK. Who would you be like? Sorry, who would be your biggest inspirations growing up in that area?
Um, in terms of like pro wrestlers,
Or in general, whether it's,
yeah,
TV, celebrities, wrestling, all the
yeah,
above.
but yeah, I mean, I was pretty much like I said, I was obsessed with the wrestling. I think early on, my favorites were. I mean, I remember seeing Hogan from a very young age and kind of being like enamored by him, and even the Warrior, I was really into as a kid. And then the Undertaker came along, and I was like, "Whoa, who's this?" I feel like my first big favorite was Bret Hart, which is funny because he's still one of my favorites today. And yeah, Bret to me, I feel like in the UK, or just British or European people as a whole, we're very like, sorry, um, how do I say this? We're very different to the United States, right? So we're not as how do I explain this? I think like everything in the States, I think to a British person is so much more larger than life and more outrageous and out there. So Bret Hart, I think, was kind of because he was a more serious, sportsman-like professional wrestler. He really appealed to people in Europe, and I think that's why he became so popular in Europe. Because I think the typical British person or European would maybe see. Because I even remember as a kid watching Hogan doing his like he would win and he would pose for 5 or 10 minutes. I even remember as a child, like a 5-year-old boy, being like, oh, he's a bit of a show off, isn't he? Do you know what I mean? Just thinking like, what is he? Whereas Brett was very straight laced and serious, and so yeah, to me, I remember as a child wishing that Bret Hart was my dad. Sorry to my real dad, but I doubt for. And I mean, I've been very fortunate as well. I don't think too many people know this, but I got a chance to do a couple of spots with Brett over the years. Both of which were basically me getting punched and then put in the sharpshooter. So that was kind of like pretty crazy for me, because he was such a big hero of mine growing up. And recently, someone told me that Brett was a fan of my work, which to me is just like that's just like all the internet trolls in the world, like say, oh, he's mid or he sucks or whatever. I'm like, well, Bret Hart's a fan of my work, so I feel I'm going
The
to take
best that
that.
ever did it said
He's
that
the
you
best that
you
ever
liked
did.
your work.
Exactly, the best of all time. Do you know what I mean? So Brett was a massive inspiration, and then later on, I was really into The Rock and really into Steve Austin, and then later on Rey Mysterio and all sorts. I did think that was another interesting one was because sort of when The Rock was taken off, I'd only been around 10 or 11 years old. But I remember being a massive fan of him, even though he was a heel, which I guess that was a lot of people though, because he ended up turning into one of the biggest baby faces of all time. But I remember watching that Royal Rumble 99 where Rock wrestled and beat up Mick Foley really bad. And apologize to Mick in advance. Like I remember like really rooting for The Rock. Right? Yeah, beat him up. And I was really into him as well. So, um, yeah. But then as I got a little bit older, I started to go back and watch a lot of the old the British wrestling because I
Okay.
thought it was important for me to like, kind of understand history. And especially when I started training, I started training really young. I started training when I was 14 years old. And the trainers at my school were essentially kind of like old, like from the World of Sport era of British wrestling. There's a gentleman named Tony Scarlo. Um, and they kind of really got me onto old World of Sport wrestling. And I kind of became obsessed with that for a long time. I still kind of am, to be fair. But guys like I idolized a wrestler called Steve Gray, which I'm not sure if too many people know of. Um, and I was very fortunate because I got to do some training with him and I actually got to wrestle him when I was really young. Um, yeah, so someone like Steve Gray, who probably never gets a mention at all, because I think a lot of people, the typical fan who remembers obviously Davey Boy Smith, they may know sort of like a Fit Finlay, they've probably heard of a Johnny Saint, and that's pretty much it. But there's so much more to the British wrestlers from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And Mark Rocco, who I feel like people have heard of, he was another one for
I've
me that
heard of
just
him.
yeah, he's like he is someone that I try to what's the best word? Not copy, but I try to
Mimic.
yeah, mimic. Yeah, I take so much influence from him and his wrestling style because we're a similar build and everything else. And he's another one actually that I got to meet and kind of work with on British Boot Camp, funny enough. But yeah, there's a lot of guys, especially a lot of these older British guys that I definitely looked up to. And it's almost a shame, really, that I think about this every now and then, how sort of the history of wrestling pretty much everywhere else, like whether it's Japan, Mexico, America, um, like it's all kind of been documented, but there's really not a whole lot on old British wrestling, which is
No, it's
crazy.
hard to find.
It is, and it's like it's crazy because it was on it was a massive deal in the UK in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It was on terrestrial TV and everyone watched the wrestling. But now there just isn't that much documentation and like stuff like the shoot interviews and all that kind of stuff that all came kind of after, like years after the sort of British wrestling boom. So sometimes I think about that. I'm like, man, I need to try and maybe I should go and try and, you know, do my own research or go meet all these, the wrestlers that are still alive and try and interview them or something so we can keep this sort of the history of British wrestling alive. But and also I think at the same time though, it's cool to think that like I was a part of like the resurgence, you could call it, of British wrestling and everything else years and years later. But yeah, I'm definitely proud to be a British wrestler. Um, and yeah, the thing is as well that the style of wrestling is so different now, whereas I feel like the typical person probably wouldn't find sort of British wrestling from the 70s or 80s too entertaining. I love it, but wrestling's evolved so much. It's almost like a complete different entity. So, but yeah, if anyone's listening and they're interested, go check out some Rollerball Mark Rocco. You won't regret it because he was ahead of his time. He was very, very ahead of his time. And people like Dynamite Kid and Finley and everyone else, they were all influenced from Mark Rocco. So definitely go back. Well, maybe not Finley, he was probably the same sort of time, but Dynamite Kid for sure. So yeah, go back and watch some Rollerball Mark Rocco. If you learn anything from this interview, that would be a good one.
Sounds good. Um, Something that I've heard you allude to in other podcasts is how difficult it was to break out of the independent scene at a certain
Mhm.
time. How do you think, or what gave you that edge to be able to do so?
Um, It's a good question. So when I started wrestling, I started training in September of 2003. I think I had my first match when February. No, sorry. I started training, yeah, September 2003. I had my first match in February 2005. And very much in my first years of wrestling, wrestling was still very much a body industry. And WWE, for example, pretty much the only thing in town, and they wouldn't touch anyone that was under 6'1" and under 250 pounds or whatever. Um, and when I started, I was very, very small in stature. So um, that was obviously kind of a big deal. And it's funny, actually. I remember, I don't know, I was like 16, 17, maybe 18. And I remember a wrestler, he's passed away now. But I remember, actually, I won't name his name because it's kind of, but either way, he said to me, he was a veteran wrestler, and he said to me, he goes, listen, he goes, obviously, like you're never going to make it in this industry, but you can still do shows like this, and you can still have fun, and you can still, travel around the country and get to do this. And in my head, I thought, I can't cuss. I'm not going to cuss. Um, but in my head, I thought, I'm going to show this mother. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to make it. He has no idea what he's talking about. So I did feel like from the young age, it was, uh, it was kind of working against me. It definitely was difficult. Um, in that, and going back to answering your question, I think a lot of guys like I don't know who gets credit for it, but at one point, I guess the mentality shift where smaller guys were all of a sudden desirable. So guys like AJ Styles, Bryan Danielson. Obviously, before then, it was, guys like Rey Mysterio, Dean Malenko, and whatnot. But I think later on, kind of more closer to my generation, um, low key, all those sort of Christopher Daniels, Paul London, all those guys, I think really helped make it easier for someone like me to succeed.
Yeah.
Um, because wrestlers started becoming smaller, and I think it was due to like the style, really. Like the fans wanted to see more of a fast-paced style, which the big guys couldn't necessarily do, or not as well at least. So that started happening. But in terms of me, I think my I got an opportunity early with TNA British Boot Camp. And when I say early, I'd still been wrestling for years before then. But I wasn't, when I got that opportunity, I wasn't ready for it. Like I just wasn't. I just hadn't had the mentorship. I wasn't steered in the right direction, I don't think yet. And so I felt like um, yeah, I didn't take advantage of that opportunity, I guess, at the time. I thought I was, but I don't think I was ready. And after kind of years, I mean, I think I'd been wrestling, let me think, nearly 10 years or so. Until I came up with this sort of character for the villain. And I do remember doing like a Dragon Gate UK tour, and Park was on. And I remember asking him kind of like, what have I got to do to get a break? And he basically said to me, he's like, you need something to stand out. He goes like with me, it's high flying. With this guy, it's technical. With this guy, it's his speed and everything else. This guy is his body, and you need something to really stand out from everyone else. So you need to excel in something in particular. And at the time, I was I I felt like I could wrestle, but I was kind of bland, and short back, hair and sides, and I was clean cut. And that's where I really started thinking, okay, why don't I come up with this character? And yeah, basically went full in, or all in, no pun intended, with the villain character. And I think what really helped me is I met a gentleman named James Musselwhite who lived in the same city I was living at the time, and he had been reaching out to a few wrestlers to take photos of them. He's a photographer, really talented photographer. And I met him. He took some really awesome photos of me. I was like, "Can you film stuff as well?" And he said, "Yeah." I thought, because in my head I'd come up with this character, the villain, and I was like, "But how can I introduce it to the fans? Because I'm just wrestling on independent shows, right?" And it's kind of hard to just come out to the ring and kind of explain what this character is. And I thought, well, how does WWE, for example, do it? And I thought, well, they play vignettes. I remember back in the day, the Mr. Perfect vignettes and or the $1 Million Man vignettes or whoever it was, Razor Ramon vignettes. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I had my own vignettes? And this is when YouTube started becoming kind of a big thing. And I thought, wow, maybe I could just make vignettes and put them on YouTube. And that's exactly what I did. And what's really funny about it is that, like, um, if I went back and watched them now, I'd probably be like, oh, these are terrible. But at the time, I feel like they were actually quite groundbreaking, at least in terms of for British independent wrestling, because no one, or even just independent wrestling as a whole, no one had invested in their character like that, I don't think previously. I mean, maybe they had, but I felt like because I'd invested so much in my character, people were like, whoa, this is different. And those vignettes, they're still on my YouTube channel now, maybe 10 years later, wherever it's been. I still get people bring them up to me to this day. And I think that to a lot of people, that was their introduction to me. And I've had a lot of different fans tell me that like, oh, your speech in this one video changed my life and all this kind of stuff. So I think that's when I learned like, okay, if I realized that wrestling wasn't just about the wrestling and having good matches. I realized that wrestling was about making people feel something, right? And if they feel
Yeah.
something, they'll remember you forever. And I just wanted to make people remember me. I just wanted them to feel something. And that's why, it's random how I ended up with an umbrella. But in my head, I was just like, I'm going to take an umbrella to the ring. And then my my thought process was, well, if they come to the show and they leave and they remember nothing, they might remember the Wally with an umbrella indoors. Do you know what I'm saying? So that everything was just about being remembered, making people feel something. And I guess I just wanted to become and make people feel the same feelings that I did when I was a kid watching Hogan or Brett or The Rock or anything else. So yeah, like I do hear quite often that it takes 10 years in wrestling to finally kind of get it or for it to like
Click.
click. And I felt like that was pretty much correct for me.
Okay.
So yeah, yeah, I really did. I mean, it might be things move a lot faster now. Maybe it's easier for the guys. I don't know. Maybe not. But yeah, took a long time for me to get the break. But the good part of it was that when I did get the break, I kind of felt like I was ready, you know.
Yeah.
Like when I started wrestling in the States, for example, or wrestling for Ring of Honor or wrestling for New Japan or whatever it was in my head, I was like, oh yeah, like I can do this. I'm gonna wipe the floor with this guy. You know what I mean? Like I'm excited to show the world what I've got. So yeah, but back then it was very hard to get a break because, dude, like you're just wrestling on indies in Europe. You think a company wants to pay for a flight and your wage and stuff to bring you to a show in the States? It's like that wasn't happening. So yeah, but eventually, obviously, we grew something, and I managed to break out. And it's funny because now I'm very fortunate where I get to wrestle in lots of different places, different countries, and a lot of times I do seminars as well, and I'll have people ask me like, "How do I get a break?" That same question that I asked Pac all those years ago. And a
Yeah.
lot of times I'll give them the same kind of answer like that he gave me. Um, but another big thing I'll say to them is, well, because a lot of these countries are wrestling, sometimes it's like, it, it, I mean, if it's outside the States, it's instantly more difficult for the talent, I believe. And especially if it's somewhere like in the Middle East or in South Africa or wherever it may be, even if it's in Canada, it's more difficult. Um, and I say to them, a lot of times I'll tell them, listen, you need to go to it because it's probably not going to come to you unless you're one in a million and happen to go viral. Um, I'll tell a really short story. I know I'm kind of diverging off, but the tag team Aussie Open, I think I've told this story before, which is Carl Fletcher and Mark Davis. This was years ago. I wrestled in Australia, and it was one show. It was like a semi-finals and a finals, and I think I wrestled Mark Davies in the semi-finals and did the match. And then afterwards, he was like, "Oh, can I email you or something to ask for advice because I didn't have a match to get ready for." I was like, "Yeah, no problem." So, and I had a match with him. I thought he was really good, like really good. Anyway, so he messaged me. He's like, "Any advice?" And I said to him, I said, "Well, honestly, dude, like, I thought you were great. My advice would be that you kind of like the problem is you're stuck in Australia, right? I'm thinking
Yeah.
these companies aren't going to fly you from Australia to do a show. Well, most likely not." And I said, at the time, British wrestling was getting really, really hot and there was a lot going on. I said, honestly, mate, I think you have the talent. You just need to show the world it. I think you should try and go to the UK or Europe or to the States to do your thing. And because I was like, there's no point in me telling you, oh, you could do this arm drag better or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter.
No.
Like, you need to get out there.
Yeah.
And I remember him kind of giving me a response saying something along the lines of like, oh, unfortunately, I can't because I don't know what it was. He was tied down to something. I was like, okay, no problem. I'm just being honest with my advice. Anyway, about 6 months later, I get an email, right? Look, this Mark Davis again. And he says to me, listen, Marty, he goes, ever since you gave me that advice 6 months ago, that's all I've been able to think about every single day. He goes, I just want to let you know now, I'm moving to England. I'm going to be there this week, right? And I was like, Wow, amazing. So I go, okay. So I messaged a few different promoters in England and I said, hey, this kid's coming, he's moving all the way from Australia. So, it's like it'd be great if you give him an opportunity. And they're like, okay, yes, I got him a few bookings. I said, listen, mate, like I'll get you a few things to get you started, and then it's up to you. Do you know what I mean? Like you can
Yeah,
go from and sure enough, he did it and nailed it. And then he really took off in the UK, really took off in Europe, and then that ended up him just taking off everywhere. So I felt like my advice, that it served well for him. And yeah, but it's always an interesting question when people ask you, like, how can I break out? Because it's just different for everyone. It really, really is. It's absolutely different for
it's
everyone.
a per case kind of scenario.
Absolutely. And I always do say, like, pro wrestling owes you nothing. Everything I've had from pro wrestling, I've been like absolutely blessed. It owes me absolutely nothing. And I count it all as a blessing. What was the point I was gonna say? What were we talking about again? Sorry, my brain.
Um, we was talking about breaking out.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I always tell people if you work hard enough, long enough, like you just chances are something may happen. I always think if I learned French every day for 10 years, then by the end of 10 years, I'll probably be pretty good at it. And maybe that's what happened with wrestling as well. So
Yeah,
just the more that you put into it, the more chance you have of getting that break. And again, that's why, for example, I told Mark Davis, like, hey, get to the UK because there's loads and loads, like, tens of shows every single week rather than where you are, where there's only one show every 2 months, whatever it may be. So yeah, it's different. It's absolutely different for everyone. Mine was the long word, but I've been doing this, yeah, 20 years now, and it's gone very quickly. And I feel like I still have a lot to offer. I'm only at 36, so um, fortunately, I feel as if, touch wood, I've been very good in terms of my looking after myself and my body. I've not been the biggest risk taker over the years. Um, and I always looked at that as a challenge. I always thought to myself, how can I get the same reaction these crazy guys are getting, but not killing my body? So, um, and that's also why it was important for me to come up with a character like the villain, if that makes sense. So, I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to do this, but I feel like I could do the villain when I'm 60. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
got to stay in shape. So, yeah, no, yeah, it it really is interesting hearing different people's stories. Like, I'm sure, like we were talking before we went on the air. You just started this podcast not long ago, 3 months ago, and who knows? It's all about just consistency and you may get a break doing it, you may not, but I feel as if, what was it, Will Smith that said it? Like you could fail at something you don't like doing, so you might as well try doing something that you
Trying
do like
something you do
doing,
like.
right?
Yeah,
So I give you more the power to you. I think this is great that you're doing this, and I think, yeah, my advice to you would just be the same for pro wrestlers. Just try and put as much into it as you can, and try and don't be afraid to try stuff. I think is a big one. Don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to try and fail. I think before coming up with a winning formula for myself, I tried loads of stuff. I was never afraid to throw something at the wall and see if it stuck.
yeah.
So I'm sure it's the same for podcasting. I don't know. I'm not really a
It
podcaster, so
it kind of is. I can tell you every episode I try to implement something new, and if it
yeah,
works, I'll keep it. If it doesn't, I'll just pretend like it never happened. Just
yeah,
move on to the next thing. And
that,
I throwing stuff at the wall and let it stick is kind of like my motto. My dad's kind of told me is just, hey kid, if you're gonna try it, try it. If it doesn't work, go on to the next thing. Eventually, something will stick.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. I think that's all a part of it is just kind of like what that sort of advice that Pat gave to me all those years ago, you can kind of put that to anything really. His thing to me was like you got to be different, you got to find what your niche is, got to find a way to stand out. And I'm sure it's the same for the podcast game. So it's just that takes a little time to work out, I guess.
Yeah, it's all in the reps. is what I've
Abs-
been. It's what I've been told by countless guys. Is hey, get some reps in. You'll find what your niche is, and you'll succeed eventually as long as you
Absolutely.
keep your mind to it.
Yeah, and as long as you enjoy it as well, I think it's important to enjoy it. Enjoy the ride.
100%.
I
Yep.
do. I really do. Yeah.
Uh, Kind of my next question, something fun I like to do on here is I'm going to throw 5 moments at you, five
Hmm.
moments throughout your career, in 3 words or less. Kind of give me your reaction to
Oh,
those
blimey.
moments.
I like to ramble on, so this may be difficult, but go on.
Okay, I'm going to start with actually one place I first saw you in the States, which was PWG and the Battle of Los Angeles.
Mhm. So you want me to describe
What it meant to you
what it
in
meant?
3 words or less.
I would say PWG was one of, if not my sort of biggest sort of break in wrestling, I would say.
Okay.
They opened
What
the door to
about
everything else.
what
Door
about
opening,
all?
I'll say.
Sorry,
Door opening, but go on, sorry.
door opening. Got it. All in versus Okada. We'll deep dive into that one in a little bit.
Just a realization of um kind of an awakening moment, a realization of just sort of how big silly videos on YouTube had gotten.
We'll go with progress pro wrestling, just in general.
Progress was a really great platform for me to develop the villain character.
Okay. And this one's going to be a more recent one. Mexico and AAA.
Uh, That's thing in Mexico, it's I always say it's like I love it. It's like the Wild West. It's just like the fans just crazy, you know, and it's funny because the lucha libre style is really, quite outrageous, but it feels like kayfabe is still real there. So, and that's what I love, right? And when you wrestle, the the fans they boo you because they hate you. They're not sitting there watching to review your match. They just want to see you get your ass kicked. So, um, I love Mexico for that. So, Mexico kayfabe lives.
Okay. Last but not least, I'm going to go with TNA and British Boot Camp.
I guess I just kind of went through it, sort of missed opportunity.
Okay.
But I'm also a
My
big believer in everything happens for a reason like that. Like that needed to happen for me to become the villain, if that makes sense. So I'm not like bitter about it or anything.
But TNA definitely probably gave you that shift. Hey, I got to change something to break
Yes,
through. Okay,
absolutely. Correct. Yeah.
that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, my next question would be what did it mean to be able to win the RevPro World Championship and then be able to defend it against guys like your Ricochets, Kevin Steen, and Douglas Williams?
Hmm. So, RevPro was kind of like my home company in England. Andy Quilden, his promoter, is a really, really good friend of mine. And it felt like so myself, I was in a tag team with Zack Sabre Jr. for a long time, and we did some really great stuff with RevPro with that, and then we kind of broke out into single stars. And again, I didn't really find my feet until I started doing the villain, and it's funny because when I started doing the villain, apparently Andy, he'll probably deny this now, but apparently he said something along the lines of like, well. He ain't going to be the villain on my shows. He's still going to be Party Marty. And I guess somehow I managed to convince him to do my thing. And I think, yeah, just I started doing my thing as the villain, and it felt more like me, and it felt like I could be myself in the ring, and I wasn't playing the part of a character. I became the villain. And so then getting to the point where you're over enough or you have enough sort of name value where they can put like their world title on you, that was a really big deal. And I got to wrestle. I think I beat Colt Cabana for the belts and got to work like a main event style match with him. And I think I'd wrestled Colt previously, but just being able to do like main event style matches, I think was really important because there's a big difference between an opening match or a match mid-show and then a main event. When you're in the main event, especially with a title match, or anytime you're in the main event, you've got to deliver, right? You need to really smash it out the park. So they gave me a really great opportunity to do that. And and I had a lot of great opponents. And I believe I lost the title to AJ Styles. And getting the opportunity to work with someone like AJ just was game changing and just learned so much just even being in his presence. Funny actually, because I lost the title to AJ, and then I think it came next. We did a freeway, myself, AJ, and Osprey, and no one ever really talks about that match. It's kind of forgotten, but like I'm convinced that was one of the greatest freeways of all time. It felt really good at the time. I might go back now and watch it and hate it, but at the time, I remember everyone being like, "That was like a mind-blowing match." But it's funny because no one really remembers that. But no, RevPro just gave me a lot of opportunities to kind of be the guy, be my, um, yeah, just to be like the main guy of a company. And I just remember doing, especially the Rev Pro, the bigger shows in York Hall, and started really developing a fan base and noticing it when I'd go out to the merchandise stand and I'd have a line for me. And I'm thinking previously I never really had that. Previously, I would do indie shows or let's say a Rev Pro show, and maybe I'm doing like £60 on the merchandise stand. It's like now I'm doing like $2,000. Something has changed, or £2,000 or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, and I think just as I grew, the British wrestling scene around me was growing, and we kind of all kind of grew together. And there's a group of guys that all kind of developed together and kind of were getting good at the same time, like myself, Zack Sabre, Tommy End, or Malachi Black, as it's called now, um, Will Ospreay, a whole bunch of guys, Gunther, obviously, that all just kind of were everyone's kind of started getting it at the same point. And as they did, the promotions and the promoters kind of did as well, whether it be a Rev Pro or a Progress. Everyone just started stepping up. I was really grateful to be a part of that. Not just be a part of it, but be, one of the like I I definitely going to take some credit for for sort of the resurgence of British wrestling. But Rev Pro is a big part of that, and they still are now. They're still kicking ass now. Rev Pro is still putting on great shows. I think Mercedes Moné is the Rev Pro Women's Champion now.
Yeah.
So and it's difficult, right? It's just difficult for independent companies to, just like wrestlers, for them to get a break as a whole. And I think especially being in England or British, it's even a little bit more difficult. So no, I wish the best of luck to Rev Pro. And in terms of independent promotions, I don't think there's many out there better than what Rev Pro puts on personally. So big fan of Rev Pro.
Shout out to them. They
Rev Pro.
still produce some of the best talent and matches that I've ever witnessed.
Yeah.
I actually one of my first interviews was with a younger British independent talent. He hadn't quite made it to Rev Pro yet.
Hmm.
Leon Cage.
Hmm.
He did the a move in the Bucks, mimicked it on TV. I don't know if you've
Oh,
heard
that
about it. It went
slingshot
by.
thing.
Yep, I got him one here, and he was very excited because he had matches booked with Michael Oku, who
Mm,
was the Rev Pro champion at the time. And like since the last conversation I've had with him, he's been able to break through. So
awesome.
like they're still developing, young independent guys into potential stars, which is great to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing as well. It's kind of like a revolving door because once you develop talent, once they get really good, chances are they're going to be picked up by one of the major companies. So someone like RevPro, they always need to be on the eye for the future and for new talent. I think that's something actually that WWE is really good at, is I was talking about that with someone, maybe with James on this stream the other day. I was just thinking, wow, they've had the performance center for a long time, and now they're doing this WWE ID thing, which I'm not 100% sure exactly what that is, but I know they're doing it, and now they've got this relationship with TNA, and I just think they're they're very good WWE at thinking about the next 5 years, the next 10
Yeah.
years, the next 20 years. And Andy or RevPro, they kind of have to be a bit like that as well, because after a while, I mean, it's kind of a surprise they still have guys like Michael Oku and whatnot now. But
Yes.
you kind of assume that might not last for that long. Then it's like, okay, who's going to be the next guy to step it up? Maybe it's Leon Cage. And I think that's really cool. That's kind of what RevPro kind of thrives on, is guys who want the opportunity, and guys that are trying to make a name for themselves. Guys like aren't turning up to RevPro and phoning it in. Do you know what I'm saying? Like guys
Yeah.
are going there and they're trying to tear it up. They're trying to get attention. They're trying to steal the show. And I know because I was one of those guys. So yeah, more power to Leon Cage. I'll have to check him out at some point. I've seen that one clip, but that's it.
He's a great guy. Good got great clips too. Very inventive. Definitely recommend checking him out.
Oh, yeah, will do.
Moving on down the line a little bit, you probably did one of the greatest debuts in Ring of Honor history.
Mm.
When you replaced Adam Cole in the Bullet Club. How did that come about? And was that kind of how you got to be a part of being the elite?
So no, actually, the timeline's a little messed up. That wasn't my Ring of Honor debut. I'd already been in
But
Ring of
yeah,
Honor.
not the debut, but like Bullet Club debut is what I meant.
Yeah,
My bad.
okay, yeah. Definitely the best Bullet Club debut ever. That's not a debate. If you think you've got one better, tell me. But
It don't exist.
no, no. I've told the story a few times. But basically, what was really straight funny about it was when I came to Ring of Honor, I'd met the Bucks previously, and before I came to Ring of Honor, and I'd worked with them and was quite pally with them, but nothing crazy because obviously we didn't see each other too often. But as soon as I came to Ring of Honor, I end up sort of becoming closer with them just as friends. This is before Bullet Club and everything else. So I started kind of riding with them sometimes or hanging out, going for dinner, etc., etc. And that turned into them sort of being like, they're getting the cameras out. Next thing you know, I'm part of their Being the Elite show. And that was really good for me because a lot of people watching Being the Elite, and I'm I feel like a natural performer. So that they put the red light on. I'm like, right, yep, I can perform. I can do this. And so we were already really quite good friends. And it's really funny because there was never it was none of our ideas for me to be part of the Bullet Club. It was New Japan's. And basically New Japan had booked me to debut there in the Best of Super Juniors. And the way Japan works is kind of everyone ends up in a stable,
Yep.
and pretty much any kind of gauge in at the time they were putting in Bullet Club. So they told me like, yes, you're going to be part of the Bullet Club. And it was funny because they wanted me to like just tweet about it. That's how they wanted my debut to be. Like, yeah, just tweet that you're in the Bullet Club now. And I was like, what? But what was crazy was when I'd received all this news, I was actually on an independent show in Ireland, OTT, with the Bucks and Kenny. So the timing was crazy. And I remember pulling them aside and explaining to them, hey, here's the deal. And it was fun because I think the next week or maybe like 2 weeks later, like just before I was going to Japan, we had Hammerstein Ballroom. I can't remember what pay-per-view it was, but we were all kind of, it was looking like it was going to be Adam Cole's last show as well. Um, so that's where we all kind of came up with this idea for me to, uh, kick Cole out and everything else. And what was great is at the time they were kind of building this kind of rivalry. I don't know if people really remember this, but between Adam Cole, and Kenny. And because we were all together in Ireland, that's like we had this idea. Because Kenny was kind of hard to like. A lot of times it was like myself. Cody and the Bucks and Hangman, a lot of times Kenny wasn't there because he would be in Japan most of the time. We would go to Japan, but he was like living there pretty much, and we would just come in a lot of times for a pay-per-view or whatnot. So me in particular, I would come for at least quite a few tours a year, but most of the time it was like every month, just flying in and out. Um, so we the debut of my debut in Bullet Club, when you see Kenny doing the video, he's on the video screen, he's doing his promo, and it veers off, and then I'm stood there. That's the big reveal. We filmed that in like a hotel hallway at like 3 in the morning in Ireland. Right? I'm stood there just in full gear, full mask and everything. Fortunately, no one woke up and saw us, otherwise the big story would have been revealed. But and I remember when it happened, I thought, how can I make this special? And something clicked to me. I thought, oh, I need to have Bullet Club on my umbrella. So I found like a local artist and asked him if he could paint this logo because he knew nothing about wrestling. So I was like, oh, he's not going to put two and two together and reveal this.
Yeah.
um, yeah, just it all just kind of came together. It was the perfect storm, I think. It really, really was. And because I'm pretty sure I debuted that night in Bullet Club, and then the next week I was flying to Japan to do my first tour of Japan as well. Um, so yeah, and again, I think looking back at that time, just that was really like the start of all this stuff now with like or even like how AEW like got to become a thing. Like it all kind of started with like moments like that we were just building and building and building. And I think I'd been building my stock a lot with myself, the villain, and that kind of brand. And
Yeah.
Bullet Club was just like this, and then we come together, boom, and then it was like kind of exploded, like for
The
two
rocket took off.
yeah, just 2 years had the best selling wrestling t-shirt in the world, because it was that Villain Club shirt, the combination of Bullet Club and the Villain, it's just like it was a really, really big deal. Because at first when they asked me to join Bullet Club, I was almost kind of like, I don't know if I want to do it because I kind of felt like, well, I've kind of got my own thing going on. But then I was like, well, seems like I don't really have a choice, so let's just try and make this work. And I think that's why we were very fortunate to have that be in the elite platform as well to kind of tell our own stories. And dude, we had things, we were rocking and rolling for quite a while, and it got to the point at Ring of Honor shows where 95% of the audience would be wearing black and white. It was like either the Bullet Club or Villain
Yes.
Club or Kenny or Cody, whatever it was. Um, and yeah, things just really, really took off. And again, like we were saying before, it's all just kind of timing and everything else. But no, definitely, I'll end my ramble by saying this. I do remember because a lot of the Ring of Honor shows, pretty much all of them would end with the elite in the ring. And I would sing songs and we would talk to the crowd, have fun, sign autographs, etc. But I remember one point, it must have been not long before like the Bucks and everything left, but we were in the ring and we did like a big arms up in the air. Then we all cuddled each other. And remember Matt Jackson saying to us, so he said, oh, we will never be more over than we are right now. So enjoy it. And we all agree still now that yeah, he was right. So it's that's how wrestling works. That's exactly how it works. So I'm just very fortunate that I've, got to be part of like some really sort of big moments in wrestling, and people seem to have fond memories of it. Like that's really, really cool because that's pretty much all I ever wanted to do. That's what I set myself out to do as a kid, and yeah, I'm living the dream. I definitely am, and it's not lost on me. I appreciate it, and I'm very grateful and thank God every single day that I get to do what I do. So yeah, and just the Bullet Club as a whole, I guess, was a big part of my life, and without it, I don't know where I'd be right now. Things would definitely be a lot different. So I will say this: I do think I don't know if Bullet Club gets the appreciation just for like how much it kind of did for wrestling outside WWE.
Probably
Um,
not.
Probably not. I don't know how many people know the story, but how Bullet Club shirts ended up in Hot Topic. So Hot Topic has like buyers, right? So people that decide what goes in the store. And they were all, for years, Hot Topic had been selling WWE merchandise. And so one year, WrestleMania, I can't remember which one it was, but basically the buyers were at WrestleMania and they kept seeing everyone wearing Bullet Club t-shirts. So they went to WWE and said, "Hey, can we get these Bullet Club t-shirts from you guys?" And WWE were like, right?
We don't have those.
Exactly. So then I guess they did the research and they found out who the Bullet Club was, and they reached out to us and were like, "Yeah, we want your shirts in the store." And we're like, and I think at first it just said like, "Okay, we're just going to do the standard Bullet Club shirt and kind of see how that goes." And then that was like number
Flew
one.
right
So
off the shelf.
let's try the Bucks. That was not. And yeah, it's pretty crazy, dude. Because like my shirt, like I remember being like the number one seller over things like Harry Potter, and just it's just like like really, really, really crazy. And we kind of became as close to mainstream as possible, really. I do remember so many times like seeing bootleg versions of my shirts on like boardwalks and stuff like that, and just being like, what? Like, it's really kind of crazy, really kind of crazy. But no, I've got a lot to be thankful for in terms of the Bullet Club. And it
So
was the best debut of the Bullet Club as well, by far. Name a better one, I dare you. Most
that's
people
what
can't
the
name it. They just
comment
pretend.
section. Go ahead.
Comment
See if we
section,
can get a better one. There's
there's
not
not.
one.
There's not
It's
one.
going to
Like,
be empty.
yeah, exactly. They're gonna try. They're gonna be like, well, when Finn Balor started the group, it's like you didn't watch that. Don't
No,
lie. You didn't
you
watch.
went
That
back and
makes me,
watched it. They
dude.
watched
That
you
makes
live.
yes. The
Uh,
wrestling fans. They'll be like, the best version of the Bullet Club was this. I'm like, no, the best club, the best version was us, and you don't want to admit it, but 100% was. It doesn't come close. Like when you say, oh, it was when Fergal did it or AJ. Like you didn't watch it back then. Don't lie.
no,
Like we got it in them, and whatever. I'm not going to get into that debate.
fair enough. You know, something else that like made you guys revolutionary was when Cody kind of took that bet for Meltzer and you guys
Mhm,
did all in.
mhm.
When did y'all, you, Cody, the Bucks, all of you guys find out that all in was going to be taking place? And what was the reaction like within the group?
So, um, the thing is with the first All In, originally it was supposed to be like a Bullet Club show,
Mhm.
and it was going to be run by Ring of Honor funded, which it was. But the idea was that it was run by the Bullet Club, and that's why, in fact, I actually put a video up of my entrance today because I was thanking Christopher Daniels. So, but if you see the stage, it says like All In, and there's a massive like Bullet Club logo.
Yeah.
So originally it was supposed to be a Bullet Club show. Somehow it got changed to Cody and the Bucks. So somehow myself, Hangman, and Kenny got shafted. But whatever, I didn't really care. I was just kind of like, whatever. Um, let's just try and sell this place out. Um, and dude, it's funny because I thought I was like, wow, we booked this 10,000 seater. And I guess to people now, it just doesn't seem like a big deal. But it doesn't seem like a big deal now because what's happened since, but for the time, this was humongous. And I remember thinking, oof, like, I don't know. I was thinking things are pretty hot. I think we'll sell out, but maybe not until like the day of the show. And I remember we were we were on the road the day the tickets went on sale. I can't remember what we were, but myself and the Bucks, I assume Cody, Hangman, we were traveling to a show when the tickets were going on sale. We're in the car, and I was like, okay, guys, let's all predict how many tickets we think we're going to sell on the first day. And I can't remember everyone's guesses, but mine was the highest. I predicted that we were going to sell 4,000 tickets on the same day. And I say I predicted it. I said it out loud, but in my head, I don't know if I actually believed it. I was just kind of wishful, kind
Shooting a
of
number.
out loud. Yeah, I was like four because I think Nick Jackson had said like I think 2,500, and then someone's gone, oh, maybe three, and I was like, what about four? And so we all kind of predicted. And then by time we had rocked up to the building, um, they were like, dude, it's sold out in 30 minutes. And we are just like, again, it was just insane. And I remember just like seeing Joe Koff, who's unfortunately passed away the last 6 months, who essentially ran Ring of Honor. And I remember just like hugging him, being like, "Oh, this is just insane." You know, it was like hugs all around. You know what I mean? It was all just like, "Wow, this is okay. This is real now, right? This is," and it felt like it's crazy because this was before there was millions of dollars involved. It was before all of that. It was just these guys who loved wrestling goofing off for the camera to make a little YouTube show because we wanted the fans to get to know us better. We wanted to make the fans feel something. We wanted to build that connection. And that was why, like, it was hard for this is going to sound really big-headed, but it's kind of hard for the other wrestlers on the roster to compete with us just because we had this weekly platform where, these guys are going out and the fans are they're seeing you wrestle a 10-minute match once or twice a month, whatever it may be. We're going on this show every week. And sometimes the shows are 20, 30, 40 minutes and they're getting to know us and everything else. It's like, these fans are building up like we're building equity with the fans and we're building up
Yes.
like a rapport with them almost. So yeah, and I'll say this as well, and I think I've said this before, but the Bucks don't get the credit they deserve, like at all. And people hate on the Bucks and they'll say, oh, whatever it is. And it's like, I even see sometimes it's like, oh, the Bucks ruined AEW. I'm like, dude, there wouldn't be an AEW without them. 100% not. 100%. Like, and that's not my opinion. That's like, I know,
It's a
you know what I mean?
fact.
Like, it would not be an AEW without it. Here we go. Actually, I'll give you something exclusive for your podcast because it just came to my head. And I don't think I've ever told this story before. And I
Okay.
also don't think anyone else has. Do you know what the original name for AEW was?
No, I
It
do
was
not.
it was UEW.
Okay.
It was, I think it was Ultimate Elite Wrestling. That was the first name for the company. The
Okay.
first like contracts that TK sent out were UEW contracts. And I believe it was Matt Jackson that ended up getting it changed to All Elite Wrestling. Um, but yeah, the popularity, I think it really, really did start with the Bucks, and then it helped the fact that Kenny had become a massive superstar from New Japan in those matches of Okada. I had become a really big star in Europe and was developed with this villain character. Cody was hot coming out of the WWE and walking away from them. So again, like we kept saying, that kind of perfect storm. But the only reason that show sold out was because of the following on YouTube from that YouTube show. It was because of Being the Elite, and Being the Elite was all created and made by the Bucks. And I'm telling you, without them, there would be absolutely no AEW. So there might be something else, there may be, but yeah, I think they'll get the credit one day, but it will be like years and years time,
It'll be
unfortunately.
far
Yeah.
down the line.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But
You,
I'm giving them credit right now.
like being the elite, I mentioned off camera, I believe that I watched you before you became the villain.
Mhm,
But like being the elite was the platform where I believe I really got to know you as a person. And
mhm,
the same with Cody or the Bucks. Like, and it introduced me to Kenny Omega and
mhm.
things like that. So like being the elite really, I think, just let the fans get in there and know you guys to where we cared more. And like you said, it did definitely give you guys an edge over the rest of the indies because nobody else was doing it. And
Yeah.
as a fan, it definitely just was like, okay, now I want to know everything they're doing because this 20, 30 minute show lets me
Mhm.
know a little bit. And it just gives you just enough to want more.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And it's funny, dude. I remember at the time this happened like more than once. I remember fans telling me, "Hey, I'm a big, big fan of you. Like, I've never seen you wrestle before." I'm like, "What? So how are you a fan?" They're like, "Oh, from being in the elite." I'm like, Okay. Like that's pretty
Fair
crazy.
enough.
I built fans without them even seeing me wrestle. Do you know what I mean? So it's like,
It's
well, okay.
crazy.
It's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy.
Um, speaking of All In, you had your match with Okada.
Mhm.
Was it was kind of built as one of the main events.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the match with Okada, and maybe the reaction it got live, and you
Mhm.
how it was received afterwards?
Yeah. So I mean, I remember they were like, I think it was Nick Jackson whose idea it was he wanted me to wrestle Okada. And I was like, well, that's awesome. But I was also like, I don't want to go on late on this show either, because I know how these shows go, and it's so hard to follow everyone that's going out there trying to steal the show.
Stacked
Um,
card.
but yeah, but no, so the match of Okada is kind of like a bittersweet because like the match itself I thought was it's the first time me and him had worked, I believe, and I felt like we tore the house down and we told a great story and the people were really, really invested. Um and then but the match went over in time, which this is kind of a long story to go in and out of. But but maybe one day I'll reveal the truth in a book. But I will just say this: that first of all, lots of people went over on the show. But second of all, myself and Okada both got told, "Hey, this is how much time you've got. Um, don't cut any time. You do you go out there and steal the show. Don't cut any time at all." We're like, "You sure? You want us to trim some off?" We're like, no, go do no, like whatever. We'll have to do the dark in the match, sorry, the main in dark or whatever, but like go do the match that you've got. Okay. And so that happened. And then I guess we went over. But actually we didn't we technically only went over, I think, like by 2 minutes from the time we got given and got told not to cut. Um, so I guess we did go over a tiny bit. But unfortunately, I was like the target of the blame. And I
Okay.
always found it kind of funny. And I would, every time I see Okada, I would joke about it with him. I'm like, why did I get all the heat? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm in the ring with the best wrestler in the world, or many at the time would consider the best wrestler in the world. It's like, you think I'm going to tell him what to do? Do you know what I mean? Like, this is the thing is
Yeah.
the fans think they know everything about wrestling. And it's like, you definitely don't. And it's different when you're on the other side doing it. But I'm like, when you're in the ring with someone like Okada, who's the best in the world, he's calling the match. I do as I'm told. So I thought it was pretty hilarious how I took all the blame and the burden for the match going over. And Okada received nothing. But that's just how, and that's how the kind of narratives, I guess, work. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's just how it goes. So, bit of a bittersweet with that. Like, I don't think I've ever actually watched that match back because of that, because it's kind of got a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. But
Okay.
in fact, today someone told me, and I hear this a lot, like, oh, that was the best match on that show. And I've seen the rest of the show, and again, it probably just sounds like I'm blowing smoke up my own ass, which I don't do. I'm very honest. And but that night, I think we did steal the show. I think we did have by far the best match. Um, and because we went out there and we told a story, we built that up on being the elite. We really did, and we built it up from, the story of Okada being this heavyweight, unstoppable machine in New Japan, and me just being a junior heavyweight.
Yeah.
Um, and we told that really, really well. So, and I think that was the beauty, I think, of All In as well. And I think maybe what the original concept for AEW was kind of based on stuff like that, where like the villain versus Okada hadn't happened before because he's a heavyweight, he's a junior heavyweight. And the idea of like our wrestling show is like, okay, we're going to do stuff that shouldn't happen. I remember early on when there was talks of AEW and everything, and we had dinner with Tony Khan, and he spoke about bringing Goldberg in, and I said, it will work, but it will work because we'll do a pay-per-view and he's going to headline the pay-per-view. Not headline it, but be on the pay-per-view, and he's not gonna wrestle Chris Jericho. He's gonna wrestle Pentagon Jr. Do you know what I mean? He's gonna wrestle Phoenix. People are gonna be like, "What is this?" Do you know what I mean? Right? I was like, "That's what we want. We want it to be like, whoa." And I guess me versus Okada at the time was kind of one of those sort of matches, where it's like not as crazy as that. Um, but yeah, but no, Okada, man, like very like he's one of the few wrestlers that, and that match I had with him on, we had like a 26-minute match, whatever it was, all in. That was the first time he'd ever touched before. And typically it's very hard to have a good match with someone the first time you wrestle because he just takes time to get to know someone in the ring. It's time to build
Feel each
chemistry.
other out.
Yeah, it really does. So to go out there and just like be expected to tear the house down when you never touched each other before is kind of a big ask. But I just remember there's been a few wrestlers. I mean, actually, there's been a lot of wrestlers, but I think throughout my career, the two wrestlers that I was in the ring with, where I was just like during the match, where I was just like, wow, this guy is so bloody good. Actually, there's three. The three that I was in the ring with, I'm just like, oh, these guys are just on another level. But AJ Styles, Bryan Danielson, and Okada, all three of them, I was just like,
It's
yeah,
a
I just
Mount
remember,
Rushmore list right there.
yeah, I just remember being in the ring with Okada, just being like, oh, this guy is just so freaking good, And it's like you can't even explain it, like why. He just is, right?
He probably
Uh,
doesn't get the credit he deserves either. Okada.
no, well, I don't know. The
Yeah.
thing is, I think the deal with Okada is those matches he had with Kenny. I just don't like the the problem with those matches is that I just don't think there's ever like any topping them, and and like they don't need to be topped. You know what I'm saying? Like they
They
don't. I
were
don't.
just too good for
Right.
reality, kind of.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Yeah.
crazy
Yeah.
that they even exist and they were that
Exactly.
good.
Exactly. And I don't think Okada has been like, I'm going to try and top that. That's not been his, thing. Like, I think but I think for sure for a long time, maybe it's different now, but I think like, I don't know if we all got enough credit for like New Japan's sort of break in the States, because I think for the longest time, it was the only thing from New Japan the fans knew were the Kenny Okada matches and the Bullet Club / Elite, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think New Japan even realized that because we would do shows in the States and it would be sold out, 6,000 people, all pretty much because of us and Okada. And then we'd be like, oh, who are you wrestling tonight? Oh, you're in an 8-minute, 8-man tag. I'm like,
Why?
okay. Yeah, and yeah, I just then like the whole crowd be wearing our shirts. And I think I remember once this. I don't know if I've told this story before, and I don't want to sound like I'm disrespecting anyone, but I remember one time it's like a 10-man tag, and we're all in the Bullet Club. It's like me, Bucks, Cody might have been in it. Maybe Cody wasn't. It's like me, Bucks, Hangman, and Big Farley,
Okay.
who's like a Bullet Club staple, and New Japan staple. And we were in like a 10-man tag or whatever it was. It was a very short match. And like they because he's the heaviest guy, or the heavyweight of the team, we all came out to his music, right? Which again I got no problem with. Farley is like he's another guy who doesn't really get enough credit for especially his influence with Bullet Club. Um, but I was just like, can't we? I was thinking this crowd is paid to see like us as well. Like, can't I do my entrance? Can't the Bucks do their entrance? Um, and so I don't know if New Japan realized kind of how big a deal. I remember one time come on one of those New Japan USA shows, coming to the back, and I won't name who, but one of the office members being like, "Wow, that crowd was they really screamed Chikumeng, didn't they? Like they were really into you." And I'm like, yeah, like so um so yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it was like a missed opportunity that time. I'm not sure. I mean, it, it's difficult, I guess, but and obviously everything happened, and AEW and everything else. But for a while, I think people forget that it was New Japan and Ring of Honor that sold out Madison Square Garden like that, nearly 20,000 people. It's like things were pretty hot for a minute, and it's like, yeah, was it capitalized upon? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, the fact that Ring of Honor ended up being out of business, within the next 3 or 4 years after that, it's kind of like, something went wrong. But yeah, I can't even remember the original question now. Sorry, I've rambled on, just revealing
You're
everything.
fine. We was talking about Okada, and
Yeah,
you went off on a great tangent.
yeah, and he's now, I think, Okada now. It's like, dude, that guy, he's headlined so many dome shows and so many, long matches for New Japan. I'm sure now he'd just like to be able to be paid and be able to walk still. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
He's having fun. It's obvious on TV
mhm,
that he's having a great time, and that's really what wrestling should be all about: is having fun,
mhm.
having good matches, and having good crowds, and
Yeah,
just
yeah.
stuff for me and you to sit on here and talk about.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have to do anything ever again. He'll still be considered one of the best of all time. But I'm not sure if he even cares about that. I think he just wants to be happy. And dude, Okada's like younger than me. I think he's like same age. It's just like, yeah, get paid and like look up. Just if you can get out of the business in one piece, like that's a big win, I think. And dude, talking about tangents, I just see so many guys now, guys and girls just take so many unnecessarily like risks in the ring. And there's so many injuries are just so frequent, and people, especially, and I think a big part of it has been um, because how big social media has become, where people are like desperate to have like a viral moment or whatever it may be. And everyone, like, so many people just taking such big risks, and a lot of times I just don't think they're worth it. And I always sort of think to myself, you can make these moments without trying to kill yourself. Like I think back to that match of Okada, and I think like the most, at least for me, the only thing I remember from the match really, and what I think the fans remember, is Okada goes for the Rainmaker on me, and I open up the umbrella, right? And it's like nobody got hurt doing that. Right? You know what I'm saying? But the crowd went absolutely insane. And it's like, and I'm not going to be that guy that sits here and says, oh, work smarter, not harder, because I'm a big believer in working hard. I think you should work hard every single time. And every single time you come to watch the villain work, I am working very, very hard. But also at the same time, there's taking like really dangerous bumps doesn't mean you're working hard. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like, if anything, I actually think it's the opposite because I actually think it's quite lazy where people are just like, well, I could try and work to get a reaction and work to tell a story and get people invested, but that is pretty difficult. So I know I'll just like jump and land on my head for a table, whatever it may be. Um, and I think that quite often if I watch a match and I watch a match and the crowd starts chanting, "We want tables," I think something's gone wrong here. Do you know what I mean? Like when I
they're
wrestle,
bored. There's
yeah,
some
well,
reason that they want
I don't know
more.
if it's they're bored or I just think like, why is the table more open than the wrestlers? You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
that's a
Like
problem.
it is exactly. So yeah, that's another little tangent for me. But I do wish that a lot of the guys and girls now would just think about it a little bit more. Do you know what I mean? Like the
Yeah,
risk and the bumps that the people are taking. Um, uh, it's scary, it really is. And like I've seen the effect it has on people without naming names. It's really, really tough, Like the business is really tough, and that whole sort of idea of like it will chew you up and spit you out, it's absolutely true. And most guys come out of it, a lot of them worse off than when they started. And there's only been a handful really of big success stories in wrestling and like guys that managed to walk away with money and their bodies. There's not many. I mean, The Rock, I guess, being one. I guess you could argue Stone Cold Steve Austin. There's been a few, Goldberg maybe. So yeah, in terms of Okada, I'm just like, dude, you've paid your dues, make some money. You know what I'm saying? And
100%. Yeah,
this sounds like I'm saying he's not trying now. He absolutely is, but I'm just saying like he doesn't need to be doing 60-minute matches every single week, killing himself.
definitely not. And there's a way he can go about working a safer style and give us the entertainment that we're seeking without,
Absolutely.
and be able to walk out at the end of the day.
Dude, like Bret Hart is my favorite wrestler of all time. He wasn't getting dumped on his head, every week, week in, week out. Do you know what I'm saying? So it can be done.
It's possible.
It is
Um, I
very much possible.
I just got two more questions for you.
Sure.
Something that I noticed from doing research and looking at your social media accounts is you do a lot of coaching and
Mhm.
seminars. Is that something to you that is important?
Um, that's a great question. Yeah, I guess it is important to me. And there's a few reasons why it is. And I think one, I think the big reason why I have such willingness to want to help people, especially in wrestling. I mean, one, I just love professional wrestling, so I just love seeing it done correctly, which you don't always get to see. Um, but I felt like I didn't really get the help I needed. I mean, I did in some ways from certain people, but like I never had like a real full-on like mentor, which I kind of wish I did. I just kind of like left to kind of work it out myself. I wouldn't say any real one person trained me. I felt like I kind of learned little bits from different people and then kind of got thrown out there and kind of had to work it out myself. Um, so I kind of like the idea of offering people the help that I didn't get when that's why it took me 10 years to get a break. But also, uh, just yeah, I've just been like even now, like there's guys in WWE, there's guys in AEW, top tippy top guys that like I'll work with, that I'll help promos, I'll help with characters. Because I just feel like that kind of side of wrestling, kind of like I'm not a big fan of teaching people like, okay, here's how you lock up, here's how you take a back bump. Like, I don't want to do that. Like anyone could do that. Anyone could teach you how to take a bump. I like taking talent with potential and getting that potential out of them and creating stuff. Like I'm a big fan, like I said to you before, create, don't hate. I love to be able to create. So like I tell you one, I don't know if you watch NXT, but have you seen Ariana Grace? I had to think of her wrestling name then.
Yep.
Santina Morello's daughter at NXT. Well, I trained her for like 6 months before she went to WWE. Basically, like to think that I got her ready, and I helped come up with that gimmick for her. Like she wanted to, well, no, she did. She wanted to do the like the beauty queen pageant, but I was the one that said, okay, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like? And came out with. I was like, well, if you're going to do that, you need the whatever it's called, the crest
Sash.
across the sash. Yeah, it's like the you need a crown. I said, oh, you should be Miss WWE if you're going to be a beauty queen. And I can't remember if I think I said Miss WWE and they changed it to Miss NXT, whatever, same thing. Um, and kind of helped come up with that concept. And then to see that on TV and like getting over is really cool. And like I said, there's so many other talents now that I'll help with. And that definitely makes me feel good. The fact that talents that, have done well in the business, like turn to me for help and turn to me for ideas and creative pitches and all that kind of stuff. I think that's really, really cool. So no, I love to help. And also there's so like in terms of in the ring, there's so much that I can't do, but like I'll come up with ideas and give it to guys that can. You know what I mean? Or there's ideas I have often where I'm like, this is a sick idea. It won't work for me, but it can work for this person.
Yeah.
And that for me, like that's what wrestling kind of should be, right? Like the bell to bell stuff is kind of like the theme of this interview, really. Like the bell to bell stuff, it's very important and it's cool, but like there's just so much more to wrestling as well. And I feel like in this day and age, there's uh, a lot of the other side of wrestling kind of gets ignored almost. Um, and I'm still just a big, big fan of that. There's a reason why you told me that, like, you remember me and everything else. And it's probably not necessarily from the bell to bell wrestling. I think of like watching, I didn't actually see the match, but I saw Pentagon's like entrance at WWE and him winning the match and his promo afterwards. And it was just like, well, I was going to say blown away by it, but I wasn't because I knew exactly what he can do and what he's going to bring. But like, that was all I needed to see. Do you know what I mean? You see that entrance, you're like, yes, that's pro wrestling. Yeah, and
It's
I think
it's the moments that are just
yeah,
that captivate.
absolutely, and that's it. I want to captivate. So that's a great word of the way of putting it. Sometimes wrestling in this day and age has kind of maybe moved away too much from that, but to me, it's still very important. So yeah, I do tend to work with a lot of like established talents, but also I own a ring, so I do training with um yeah, normally more like established wrestlers, but also I'll typically when I'm wrestling in different countries, they'll ask me to do a seminar. And that's always fun. That's how I discovered, well, I didn't really discover him, I guess, but well, kind of Brody King, funny enough. Like he came to like a seminar I was teaching or I was training somewhere and he was there. And I was like, who's this big guy? And I just remember meeting him being like, he seems like, he's big, covered in tattoos, like he can move. And I took, I was like, what's your name, Tom? He's like, okay. And then like the next year or two, I kept seeing his name coming up like on the internet, like, oh, he's wrestling here, he's wrestling here. And I was like, oh, this, I remember, and he was pretty good in my seminar. Like he's doing really well for himself. And then when it came to come up with the idea of Villain Enterprises, I was like, what about that Brody King guy? He was pretty good. So, it's almost like I found him in a seminar, which is kind of funny. So yeah, I love giving back. I love sharing the passion of professional wrestling. And I'm a big fan of just even at shows, I'll like to jump in the ring. If there's someone on the show that I think can teach me something, I'm gonna ask them to jump in the ring with me before the show. That happens a lot. And it's like, yeah, I've been doing this 20 odd years, but it's like I can still learn all the time. And I know that some people might get held back by that. They think they've learned it all, whatnot, or they're too good to do that. I'm like, no, I'm like, if this guy's on the show, hey, mind jumping in the ring with me? Show me a few things. I think that's awesome. And that's the thing with wrestling is that you will never ever master it. Never. You're just always learning constantly. Like I said, I've been fortunate enough to do this like 20 odd years now. I'm still learning all the time. Learn something new every day. It's crazy. Like, and again, you never ever master it. You try and get as good at it as you can, but problem is things change, and
Yeah,
wrestling now is very different from when I first started. It's very different from 10 years ago. It's very different from 5 years ago. So it's ever evolving. And I, as much, I try, there is a lot of stuff that happens in wrestling that frustrates me in this day and age. But I just remember, I'm like, okay, well, you know, either get better or get better. And I'm like, if I can't remember the phrase, but it's like if you live in the past, then you'll die a little bit every day. So I'm like, okay, wrestling is turning this way. I don't particularly agree with it, but I've got to go with it. Do you know what I mean? you got to go along for the ride, if that makes
yeah.
sense. So I try not to bash it or anything else. And you just try to adapt. You try to evolve. Um, but yeah, I I feel like I've had a good influence on the business as a whole, and more and more. I mean, I'll have people tell me, "Oh, I used to watch you when I was younger," which I'm always a bit like, "Whoa," but I have a lot of wrestlers that tell me the one thing I get a lot from younger wrestlers is you were a big inspiration for my gimmick, and I think that's really cool. I think that's actually like, if any, all the things I achieved in wrestling, I think like being an inspiration to other wrestlers, I think is really freaking like probably my biggest achievement, if that makes sense. And you
Yeah.
see it as well. Like it's funny because I didn't invent like an entrance mask, right? Absolutely not. But I feel as if I definitely made it a thing and brought it back and popularized it. Now when you go on an indie show, it's like half the roster has got entrance mask. And
Or
typically they don't
Cody.
Cody, yeah, exactly. Yeah, loads of people have done it. And a lot of times, like I'll think, like the mask doesn't even really fit with the gimmick, but they're trying something so cool. But yeah, a lot of wrestlers tell me like, "Oh, your gimmick really inspired me to come up with mine." I think, if anything, that's really really cool. Yeah. So yeah, I guess I've kind of fallen a bit more into that role as I've got a little bit older.
It happens. It happens.
It does.
You know, my my last question is going to be looking at the future. We're early into 2025. Marty, what are your goals for this year?
Um, so I got asked the same question a few weeks ago on another interview I did, and I said, yeah, I think the time is right. I think this is the year that I'll probably get signed to a major company. And it was funny because I said loads of stuff in this interview, but like that was the one that like all the wrestling headlines and news sheets decided to run with. And I was thinking, this really isn't news. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm flattered that you think that's a headline, but I didn't think that was particular news. But no, I think I think last year, especially towards the end of the year, I was wrestling and traveling so much that I my diet and training kind of took a bit of a backseat. And I wasn't really happy by the end of the year, kind of what shape I was in. Um, so fortunately, I took January off in terms of traveling on the road because I'd been just like going really, really hard before like the end of last year, just traveling everywhere and doing like 3 flights in a day and just like 16 hours on a flight and then laying over in an airport for hours and hours and then, oh, your flight's delayed and oh, all this kind of stuff. Oh, they lost your bag and just like I think it's a lot of stuff that people don't see or don't really think is a thing. It's like we go for quite a lot. Um, Traveling is, yeah, I mean, I'm very grateful. I love going to new places, like absolutely love doing that. But the actual physical traveling part, like, I feel like that's got to be the best part of being a billionaire is just being able to fly private. Like I want to become a billionaire now just so I can fly private because I'm sure it's just so much. Oh, that'd be such a game changer. Such a game changer. Um, but where was the point I was getting to? So yeah, this at the moment, this January, I mean, I've been working on a lot of other projects, like a lot of stuff. But really getting it like this year, I really, really want to get in the best shape of my life. And I guess that is related to wrestling. That's more of a personal thing, but it relates to the wrestling. Um, so I want to do that, but also I really want to continue just wrestling in different countries because I've just been so fortunate to check out these different places. And when I was younger, I didn't really appreciate it, and I didn't really take the time to go check out where I was at. I just kind of in hotel, wrestle, leave. This last
Yeah,
couple of years, I've decided to really like explore the places that I get to visit. In fact, Alex Shelley said to me the other day, he said, "Oh, you and M Dog 20 are the most traveled wrestlers I know." I was like, "Well, I guess that's a compliment." Um,
definitely a compliment.
but yeah, I guess so. But so I definitely want to continue to do more of that. But yeah, I think it's time that people ready to see me on the big screens. I mean, I think people have always been ready, really. So it's just waiting for one of those companies to kind of take the plunge. And but yeah, I think you'll be seeing me on TV this year. I don't know. Maybe it'll be next year. I don't know. But I'm still going to be doing my thing. I'm still, my tagline at the moment, it's not ideal, but I'll say, I'm the wrestler that you can't just see by turning on the TV. You've got to rock up to your shows to see me, right? And I think there's something kind of cool about that as well. And fortunately, like we started off the show, I've got dates coming up in Fort Worth, Texas, Dallas, Atlanta, Vegas. So all these places people can come see me. And yeah, I think the fact that maybe a lot of people haven't seen me on their TVs for a while, maybe it's like even more special when they do get to see me. I'm just a big believer in everything happens for a reason, just a big, big believer in that. So yeah, I I'm excited for the year 2025, and I think if you're a villain fan, then you should be excited as well. And the people that have supported me, like I I say this all the time, and it sounds so cliche, but I always say like I feel like I have the best fans in the world because they've just stood by me and they're just so passionate and you know I owe everything to my fans. Do you know what I mean? I absolutely do. Like I get to do what I love because of them, and it's not lost on me. Like I'm forever grateful to all my fans, and I appreciate anyone that supported me, anyone that bought a ticket to see me, anyone that's bought a shirt. Like I love them all. I love them all. I really do. And yeah, wrestling now is a lot of kind of giving back to them. Like I want like when you come see the Villain live at a show. I mean, I say it in my promos, but I mean it as a shoot. I say in my promos, like, come watch the greatest show on earth, live and in living color. And that's what I try to do every time I go out there. I just try to put on a show. I try to put on something that people will remember forever. Um, and like I said, I'm just so grateful that I get to do this. And yeah, but without the fans, I wouldn't have anything. So, I yeah, my appreciation for them. I just hope they know how much I appreciate each and every one of them. I really, really do. And yeah,
I
2025 should be exciting. I hope so.
I can tell you as one of the Villain fans that we appreciate every mile, every match, every moment. I'm gonna say thank you, not only for being on here, but for you being you. I'll just put it that way. For you being Marty Scurll, thank you.
Justin, thank you for you being you. I appreciate you. And
Um,
I appreciate
Go ahead.
this podcast. I love wrestling podcast. Hell yeah.
With that said, maybe we can get you on here in the future.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah,
Okay. I'll
absolutely.
leave it up. I feel like could we could dive into all kinds of stuff. I'd love to have you on here and we could really maybe deep dive into some progress or some Rev Pro, some of those things we grazed on, but we didn't get to dive into.
That's the thing, bro. There's been over 20 years, so I could do a whole podcast on one subject. You know what I mean? So it's difficult to fit everything in. But no, thank you so much for having me, and I wish all the best of luck to you. And yeah, just keep doing what you're doing, dude. Like I said before, it takes time. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of patience. But if you're doing what you love, then you never work a day in your life. So just keep it up. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Marty, we will see you later then.
See you later. Thanks, guys.